am Jimmy Armel. This is the Tom Rowland podcast, and I am the captain and founder of Not Lucky Veteran Fishing. We take active duty and veterans offshore fishing for free. And during the wintertime, we satellite tag great white sharks and name them after the fallen.
Jimmy, what's up, man? How are you?
Good, brother. How have you been?
I've been great. I know that you're in the land of the heat right now. South Carolina. How hot is it there?
Savannah, Georgia, right next to South Carolina. And, oh, you're good, brother. I mean, I can throw a rock and hit Hilton Head from our beach, so you ain't far. So it's been hot. So last Thursday we were fishing. It was 118 degree heat index. Obviously, you got to watch who you put on the boat when it gets this hot, whether it's kids that are stuck in a life jacket because of laws that we got to keep kids in life jackets when it's 120 degrees and you're actively fishing, or which obviously I think maybe needs amended, or it's just somebody that's not accustomed to the heat. So you just don't want somebody to become a heat casualty out there. Obviously, being in the military, I've seen people heat stroke and everything else, and definitely want to avoid that because it'll create future issues as well.
When you're doing that in that kind of heat, do you pay attention to your own electrolytes and your customers' electrolytes? Like, what do you do to?
I pay attention. This might sound silly. I don't really have to pay attention to my consumption. I'm sure if you put me maybe back in then we had camelbacks. We'll say maybe really high stress situations, like, if people are shooting at you for 18 hours or something ridiculous like that, like you might want to watch you and yourself and your buddies hydrating. With me, I naturally drink close. If I'm on the boat, I'm drinking a gallon of water that day minimum. Yeah. And I drink probably close to that when I'm off the boat, and hot yoga this morning it was from 8 to 9. And, I drank a quart of water in there. And right after, I'll have a half gallon in me by probably 1 o'clock today, and then I'll probably have a third quart in the evening. So I'm always around that 3-4 quart mark anyway. And the clients, I do watch them because always said as Americans, I'm pretty sure everybody is pretty terrible at hydrating. I actually noticed it when I was down in Peru doing the Ayahuasca. I was the only military guy there out of 2 groups out of 30. I'm sorry, there was one other vet there from way back in the day. But I was the only combat vet there. And I was looking around, kind of just watching everybody, checking everybody out. And very few people were drinking enough water. And everybody commented, they were like, "Do you think you drink too much water?" So, yeah, I watch the people around me. It's like second nature. I pretty much have an addiction to water. So
yeah. And with all that water, do you pay attention to the electrolytes? Like, are you supplementing?
If I listen to my body, I don't worry about it as much with clients, unless I see them not drinking water, because we get a lot of sodium in our diet, and I know there's more to electrolytes than that, but usually if you have a decent amount of sodium in your diet, from my experience, you're going to stay hydrated. You're really hydrating, if I remember correctly, it's like for 2 days later, right? Like you can kind of play catch up. So when I book people for a trip, like when I take vets now, like we're supposed to have trips Saturday and Sunday. The new folks that are coming, I tell them, I'm like, hey, make sure you're getting your minimum half gallon of water a day, preferably a little bit more 2 days prior to the trip, because that's what you're really preparing for. You want to load the fluids on the front side. Electrolytes, you could slam them. I think it definitely does help, especially the night before or so a trip, to slam a bottle of BioLite. That's what I've found works best, or the little packets you can pre-mix. There's like an off-brand one. I forget the name of it off the top of my head.
I use Element.
What do you use?
LMNT, Element.
Element. I haven't heard of that one. When I was running and gunning doing my for-profit charters, I fished. I was on the water a lot more. Uh-huh. And I would take one of those during the summertime. I would take one of those hydration packets every night.
Yeah, I think it makes such a big difference. It really does. So let's. You were on podcast number 606, and this one's going to be in the 990s somewhere.
Wow.
So there's been some time that's passed between those two podcasts, and let's bring people up to speed. So tell us about your military career. You were in the military for 11 years, is that correct?
Yep. Yes, sir. I did 11 years. I started off in 2005. I joined kind of late. I joined at 21, turned 22 while I was going away. Excuse me. I was in the conventional infantry to start off. I was in a unit. We started off as 25th ID in Seattle, Washington, or Fort Lewis, right outside of Seattle. Then we reflagged, which means we changed the unit name, and we actually went to Vilseck, Germany, which is in Bavaria, right outside, about an hour outside of Nuremberg-ish. Little tiny village. It's got tiny village, like 1 or 2 bars and a base, and that's it. From there, I did a 15-month deployment to Iraq. That was, our first day on the ground. We were kind of born under fire, if you will. Our very first day there, the first platoon was our third platoon element, but the first element that went out on a patrol got hit with an EFP, which is an explosively formed projectile, which imagine a coffee can and then a concave piece of copper basically covering it. And when the explosion goes off, it basically turns that piece of copper it goes convex and turns it into a molten copper slug, essentially. So they could put it on the side of one of those thick, I can't even do my hands long enough because of the screen, really thick concrete barriers, and it'll actually go through the concrete barrier, through an engine block, and then through another concrete barrier. So there was no stopping it. Yeah, Iran was selling them to them. It was a bad deal. So we had a guy lose his legs. He was on the ground for he was still in his truck, but they were on the ground for like an hour. And then we were the quick reaction force to it. And then we were en route to it. And when we got close to where it happened, we got blown up. Thankfully, they had tried, one of our saving graces was they would get the EFP from Iran, and the local fighters would put extra explosives in it, because hillbilly common sense is, hey, bigger boom, better stuff, right? But what that would do would turn the molten copper slug essentially into buckshot, and it wouldn't penetrate armor. So if they did that, you were kind of in the clear, and it would just kind of give you a little bit of a concussion, ring your bell a little bit. It was, I saw your face. Concussions were like just a way of life, man. It was funny when football players first started like complaining about it. Thought it was hilarious that they were surprised that smashing your head into something over and over. They're like, what? It hurts your head? Like, well, yeah, bro, if you go up to something, it's mind blowing that it was shocking to them. But whatever. And then, it was such a way of life for us, whether it was the concussion from an explosion, or you're falling down training, or you're jumping out of an airplane and you hit the ground, with 80 pounds of gear without your parachute fully open. Things like that, just kind of became a way of life. But that was our first day in Iraq. Then later in that deployment, it was pretty quiet for a long time. And then the second Saltwater City uprising happened, which was like the bloodiest battle of all the war. That had some pretty intense and fun moments. And then from there, I decided, first I thought I wanted to be SF, or Special Forces Green Beret. So I was doing my packet. My commander, who used to be an enlisted guy, the officer and enlisted worlds are way different. You can't get any more different. You can look at an enlisted guy who was in for 10 years and got out, and then look at an officer who was in 10 years and got out, and you can tell their lifestyles were completely different. The enlisted guy is going to look 20 years older, just going to be beat down, ragged, and probably broke as a joke. They don't pay us very well, the enlisted guys. But that officer, our commander, he used to be an enlisted guy in Ranger Battalion, and he went all the way up to, he was getting ready to be a first sergeant, which kind of takes you off the line out of the fight. So he went to Delta Force selection. He ended up getting hurt really bad, couldn't end up doing that. So then he just went the officer route so he could kind of start back and be back at the platoon level again. And he took me and we all had, the best officer I ever served with. His name's Denny Young, complete monster. I don't even know how many combat deployments he had, complete savage in all the good ways, cared about the boys. And he had a huge impact on my life, and he took me aside and was like, "Hey, man, you're one of the top dudes in our company. You're a phenomenal team leader. Like, we hate to lose you, but I want to see your career progress. Why do you want to go SF, like Green Beret?" I was like, "Well, we had an incident happen earlier that deployment on a breach. It was absolutely heartbreaking. I had no idea there was a kid behind a door. I was breaching it with a shotgun, and the child lost his life. Absolutely heartbreaking. Took me a long time to get over it. If you ever do completely, I shouldn't say get over, accept it. It took me a long time to accept it. Tore me apart for a long time. But the colonel we were under at the time, they wanted to like throw the book at me, like bad, like put charges against me, all kinds of scary stuff. The commander was like, "Dude, don't worry about that." So my whole thing was, well, I want to go to special forces so I can gunfight, do my job, and not worry about put under investigation. Then he informed me that Green Berets, not saying they don't ever get into a fight, because they do get into fights, but they're a force multiplier. Mm-hmm. So a force multiplier means you just go and you train locals, and you might go out with the locals, but you're going out with them and they're kind of doing their thing. Whereas Rangers is the world's premier strike force, the premier direct action force. So there's a common misconception. A lot of people think when you deploy, just because you go to Iraq or Afghanistan or wherever, or Syria, they think you're automatically fighting. They think everybody is out there getting shot at, and that's not the case. Less than 5% of all deployed soldiers have ever seen combat. Less than 5%. So out of, it's really closer to like 1 or 2%, but let's call it 5 to be generous. So that means out of every 100 dudes that you might meet that were in the military, 5, no more than 5 actually ever saw combat. That's not a judge at anybody. I love my support guys. They made it so I could do my job. Definitely didn't want to take on any other jobs. We had too much going on. But we're in a day and age where you're having what is that dude, Tim Kennedy? He's the one that just got busted out recently for fibbing, which for the years he was saying these stories, like we would send each other clips. Like I would get clips from buddies on my phone, and they would be like, "Can you believe this guy?" Because like all of us, we would hear it and immediately be like, "Bro, like we know that never happened. Like chill out," you know what I mean? So that you get a lot of that. Oddly enough, even in my job line, where people know my background and stuff, other vets will reach out to me, and there's no prerequisite. You don't have to be some Delta Dan to get on our boat. Like we have guys and girls that have never deployed. We've got ones that have deployed 15 times. Like we don't care. We're just a bunch of people that like to fish and like spreading love, Mm-hmm. But I have people say stuff to me to where I'm like, bro, like that never happened. So I think it's important. I'm trying to get that out there. The more people I talk to, that the less than 5% actually saw it. So that's what led me to Ranger Battalion. Though
I think that is like you have had lots of different experiences. I mean, you mentioned Tim Kennedy. That's one that's in the news big time right now. But you mentioned just people that are on your boat and are telling you a story. Do you think that like that's an intentional fabrication, or like with all that you've seen and all of you've done, is that like they really think that happened? Like I do believe that there are some people there that it's like something happened and then it's grown in their mind. I mean, it could be like a fishing story, right? Like, yep. like you go fishing and you caught this fish when you were 8 years old, and by the time you're 25, it was a potential world record, and like everybody there said it was this big, and then maybe you see a picture of it and you're like, that's like a 2-pounder. Like what? Like.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I think you're right in very few circumstances here, and I'll tell you why. Definitely that happens. Okay, I think some of it is societal pressure, if you will. Right, we live in a day and age where social media, your generation, our generations. Our brains aren't used to all this information, getting all this stuff at once. And I think the best example to use is it's like, social media and stuff kind of sets the standards for thing. And we live in a really interesting time in history to where, everybody wants to be known for something. Everybody wants to have a voice, and everything's supposed to be bigger and better. And I think some of it's a self-esteem thing where they're like, well, if I tell people and tell people that I wasn't a gunfighter, then they're going to think less of me, right? Also, I think some of it gets built. Like, when you're, and there's all different kinds of veterans, just like there's all different kinds of people. It's too many times we all get thrown under one blanket. They think every veteran is the same, and
Sure.
that couldn't be farther from the truth. But if you're sitting at a bar and you're, one of the subgroups of veterans, if you will, they'll wear the multicam Velcro American flag ball cap thing. Then they'll have, a T-shirt on that's like, I'll beat your ass if you stomp on my flag, or, some like really, like I want to be tough type thing. And then there's just a certain image that goes, right? Mm-hmm. Well, and a lot of like great Americans like yourself who like come up to vets when somebody's a vet, like you have me before, and been like, hey man, thank you. You've thanked me numerous times. You can tell it's genuine. It feels great, right? Well, imagine sitting at a bar and you're a young man, mid-20s to early 30s, and you got your veteran hat on and your shirt and the whole 9 yards. And this some guy and this has happened to me. I'm kind of speaking from experience. And some guy that is 8 beers and 2 shots deep, he comes up, slaps you on the back, thank you for your service, and we need to. I mean, how many times did we hear when the war was going on? We just need to carpet bomb everything and kill everybody. People have no idea about war, just blah blah blah, just talking, same thing people do with sports and everything else. But when you're sitting there and they're talking about, kill those bad guys and them this, that, and the other, and all these derogatory terms, and they're putting their arm around you, it takes a lot for a man to look at the other man and be like, hey, bro, I didn't kill anybody, man. Like, I was checking IDs at the gate. I was making sure the boys had supply. I was fueling. I was doing this. I was in the mail room, ammo, etc. Right? It's just like if a lot of fishermen, if somebody comes up and says you're the best fisherman in the world, you're not going to correct them. Not saying you or I, maybe, but there's a lot of people be like, yeah, man.
Then that grows, and then the next time you come in, it's like, hey, man, there's our guy, right? And you just kind of let it happen. I don't know.
I had a guy in Iraq, man. We went out on this. We got spun up on this mission. It was honestly a phone call. Tip got called in by a civilian. We go out and we captured this dude that coalition forces, including special operation forces, have been looking for like 2 or 3 years. And he was like a major dude. We caught him. There was no shots fired. It was perfect. We detained him. I'm pretty sure he went off to like Guantanamo or some black site somewhere. They literally came, like civilian guys came in, non-standard guns and civilian helicopter, and, bagged him up and took him away after we got him. And it was so crazy because that night I heard a guy, and he was a cook for the 82nd Airborne. And I heard him, which is not good, but I heard him on the phone, which that's the part that's not good. You shouldn't be talking about stuff on the phone over there, talking about our raid like he was on it.
Oh.
Like he was literally, like I was up there on my email or whatever I was doing back then, and I was up there doing that, and he's back. He's like, yeah, we got the #1 guy in our area, and they've been looking for him for years. I mean, this dude's in like clean uniform, everything. I mean, this is 2 hours after we caught the guy, and just on the phone. I mean, so it's a common thing, man. I think people like being the man, right? Like, I mean, how many high school football stories have we heard from 55, 60-year-old dudes?
Sure. But that's severely frowned upon by the community, right? Like that stolen valor and all of that. And you're seeing that with Tim's story right now.
And there's actually a lot more in the SEAL community and stuff. There's actually a podcast called the Anti-Hero Podcast.
Yeah, I've seen it, and that's the one.
Have you checked?
Well, I don't. I try to stay positive, right? Like I try not to jump on and pile on. And it's happening now with Tim Kennedy. Like, I'm just kind of like, you know what? maybe he made a mistake. I don't need to go listen to people piling on and all of this, but
No, not at all.
I'm aware of that podcast. I'm aware of it, and maybe that's not what they do. I'm not saying that's what they do. I'm just saying I tend to not gravitate to those kind of things.
I've listened to a couple. I've listened to the Anti-Hero with Ted Kennedy, and then the one with about Marcus Luttrell. I've listened to both of them. I'm with you. I don't, even though it's my community, especially the special operations side, it's a small community. I like to inform people.
Mm-hmm.
I kept my mouth shut about it in general for a super long time. But it's kind of gotten to the point where, it's kind of detrimental to the veteran community. One, it's wrong. But two, when I was in my dark place, like I was in a really bad place for a while when I got medically retired, like suicidal, living in dog feces in my house. It was really bad. And, stuff that we're talking about now, the stolen valor, I take it with a grain of salt and it rolls off my back. But when people are in a dark place that have been in combat, it's kind of a kick in the balls.
Yeah,
like
I can imagine.
It really is. So it can have a detrimental effect on mental health. And then also it takes away from stories that actually happen. We use Kennedy as an example. Like some of his stories are so outlandish that you hear somebody's real life story and it's almost like, meh, that real life story doesn't sound as cool. When you're starting to take away from that demographic, my buddy that lives with me, he got himself into a little trouble. He had issues that went untreated. He was shot in the face in 2010, fell off the side of a mountain, was separated from friendly forces, almost got captured. And then once he made it back over 400 meters, a quarter mile in the mountains of Afghanistan, found the element. So he's running up, literally like jaw. Sorry, this is a little graphic, but his jaw was kind of like not in one piece, right? Like it was like hanging here, arterial bleeding, the whole nine. He's like having out of body experience. And he would be a great guy to have on one day. But he was running. He like radios. He's like, "Hey, I'm coming up. Don't shoot," type thing. And he's running up, and one of the guys jumped over the berm, and he reached out, and he like threw my buddy on the ground. He was hurt, and he lit up two dudes behind him that were like 20 feet away from capturing him. And then he gets loaded onto the medevac next to his dead best friend.
Oh man.
Yeah, and the deployment before that, he said in '09, he saved a bunch of our lives. We go into this compound looking for this IED maker. And as soon as we did a simultaneous breach, and as soon as we detonated both breaches and went explosive on it, all hell broke out. Automatic gunfire from 3 insurgents, 3 grenades go off from bad guys. There's dust everywhere, so you can't see in your nods. I'm getting goosebumps. I love this stuff. And you're just going toward the gunfire. You can't see anything. Everything's browned out. And you're like, okay, gunfire's that way. I got to go that way. And then you hear Ranger down come over twice, which they had both ended up being fine. Then Ranger down, one guy got shot, just a flesh wound. The other guy, a piece of a grenade caught him in the face and broke his jaw. But my buddy, the guy who lives with me now, he actually went into a room, tapped one guy. I think he got second guy, I don't remember. And then a third guy popped up who was the IED maker and actually had his thumb in the paracord pull tab for his suicide vest. Oh. And my roommate actually headshot him a few times before he could get it off. So he actually saved a bunch of us. So whenever you hear like these stories that are stolen valor or whatever, obviously you might not know in the time, it really takes away from real heroes like that, right?
Sure.
Like that guy saved lives, and I mean, like getting shot in the face and making it out, like he was alone, got into a gunfight. I mean, just these insane stories, and I've got tons of buddies with these stories, tons, and it just diminishes theirs, takes away their shine a little bit.
I can certainly, and plus, it's not only that it takes away the shine, but it's not like those stories like that of being a hero go without a lot of baggage later. Right? Like, I mean, so you're dealing with all of this. You're having to come to terms with the story that you told, that puts you in a dark place. you're having to deal with this, and here's this other person that's just saying, oh, they did it, but they're not having to bring on any of this baggage, which I would think that that's the real kick in the balls, is like, dude, you're just saying you did this, and
then some of them are making millions off of it, or at least money. Like, I mean,
big one. That's the big kick in the balls. But
it is, a lot of these guys that, like my roommate I just spoke about, me, like I work for free now. The nonprofit doesn't make enough yet for me to get a paycheck. So I haven't had a paycheck in 2.5 years. I live off my retirement, which, is like 40,000 a year or something, and then until recently, I've had to use 1,000 a month of that to keep the nonprofit going.
Wow.
And if you think about it, I do a lot of work with people in mental health. I even talk to civilians too. Like, obviously I can't expend any resources on them. But I'll help guide people in the right direction, talk to them about my experiences. But I've only met, in my 2.5 years of doing this full time and 5 years of doing it all together, I have met 2 veterans that I would call fairly financially well off, like upper middle class, that had pretty bad issues, but still maintained. Now, I'm not saying just because a guy is super successful, he doesn't have issues. I'm not saying that, because that's not true. But a lot of times in these cases, if you look, Tom, where the Army recruits from, I live right down the street, kind of catty corner to this. Private schools are real big here because our public schools are terrible. It's like, I think to go to high school there, it's like 20,000 a year, right? Wow. You don't have military recruiters in there recruiting those boys. Like, they're not going to go. You know what I mean? Their future's set. They're going to go to college. A friend of their dad's is going to get them, and there's nothing wrong with this. This is how society works. A friend of their dad's is going to get them a job when they get out. More than likely, both parents are in the household. God forbid if they ever had any addiction issues, behavioral issues, they were addressed because the family's well-informed, well-educated, and has the resources to get better, right? Money can't cure happiness or buy happiness, but it can cure a lot of things that make you unhappy, right? But the military, they go to maybe middle class, but really their target is lower middle class and below, right? And so if you look at historically, and, I come from semi-humble-ish backgrounds, I never went without or anything like that. Not nearly as bad as some of my buddies have had it. But when you're taking from that demographic, you're recruiting from that demographic, right? Typically, a lot of the times, both parents aren't in the household. There's a divorce somewhere. There's usually a history of addiction issues and mental health issues that go unaddressed because, until we got these little things that tell us everything we need to know, you had no way of knowing. ADHD was you're a bad kid. Depression was you just need to suck it up and deal with life. And you know how it is. I can go down the laundry list. So now you have a generational mental health issue, even if it's not a huge one, right? You can still be fully functional. We know everybody knows people that have mental health issues that it would shock other people, right? Well, now you're taking somebody from that demographic and you're throwing them in the military. This person's looking for purpose. They're looking for a family. They're looking for all of these things. But the fact of the matter is, and I'm not knocking any of this, I'm just calling a spade is how I see it. Now you're taking these people with all of these pre-existing conditions, if you will, putting them around a bunch of other people with pre-existing conditions of the same thing, and it can kind of whirlwind, right? And then couple that with, if you're in the less than 5%, if you're in that gunfighter world, the infantry, the Army Rangers, the Delta Force, the SEAL Team 6, now you're praised for committing violence, which I'm all for. Violence is necessary to stop really bad people because they don't understand reasoning, because they have the same generational issues we have, just perpetuated because it's in a second or third world country. Okay.
Right.
So you're dealing with all that, and it's almost like the football player banging his head against the wall, or banging his head against somebody and being like, what do you mean that causes brain damage? Well, now you're sitting here, and I think people, they just look at it at face value, like, well, that poor guy went to war. We learned more about TBIs, and you're like, which a lot of people still don't know about those, but it's like, now it's like, oh, well, he's got brain damage and he's been to war. Well, That's why he's messed up. And you're just addressing those issues, you know. And one way I discovered this wasn't, I'm not that smart of a guy. I didn't just come up with this, like see it and come up with it. It was all of my years of healing. We were concentrating on this war stuff. And then the first time I went to psychedelic therapy, I did Ibogaine, like arguably the most powerful in the world, and 5-MeO-DMT, which is actually more powerful probably than Ibogaine, but it's very short lasting. Ibogaine, you're kind of in the peak for 6 to 8 hours. 5-MeO-DMT, it's 15 minutes. It's not long at all. It's just out of body. But it took me going to that for me to realize that, yes, war did affect me. Yes, brain damage affected me. It's impossible for you to go to war and not change somehow. But the root of my issues was all childhood stuff, right? Like my dad, I believe he did the best he could. But could have done some things differently. We'll just say that, right? And it kind of steered me in certain directions there. And that's kind of, looking back on it, like that was kind of what pushed me in the Army. So, I mean, I think when you're dealing with veteran issues, you don't just need to look at service. You need to look behind the service in the past as well, because even without seeing combat, the issues that were planted, if you will, in the civilian life, they can really get fertilized and grow into this, what feels like an unremovable weed in the military.
That's interesting. I've never heard it explained that way, which is, that's really interesting. So let me ask you about this Ibogaine and DMT therapy. That's how do you find that, first of all? And I'm assuming that it's in a clinical a clinical kind of environment.
Yeah, kind of. There's a doctor there, and a paramedic. There's always a medical staff there 24 hours. I actually found it word of mouth, a special operations community. I got a buddy that went, and it really helped him. And he sent me, oh my gosh, what is that? He's another Navy SEAL, CIA contractor, Sean Ryan.
Okay.
Sean Ryan went, and he did a podcast with the owner, who I'm now friends with. And actually, Ambio Life Sciences, the Ibogaine facility, they actually sponsor our boat now.
Okay.
Yeah, we actually have, on my boat wrap, I actually have Ibogaine and DMT molecules in there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I always joke around. I'm like, I think we're the first fishing team to be sponsored by a psychedelic facility.
I would think maybe so.
It's pretty cool stuff.
In the United States, though, right?
No, they're in Mexico. So everything is still Schedule 1 right here right now. So which means it's not even supposed to not even be good for medical research. Actually, Marcus Luttrell and Ambio Life Sciences, they're leading the charge in Texas. Texas just approved $50 million for the Ibogaine for veteran research. They want to be the first ones in the States to have it legal. But Nixon, back in the day, they were making tons of headway, like way back in the day, from like early 1900s to mid 1900s. They were making huge headway in the mental health community with psilocybin, which is mushrooms, and then LSD, acid. Just with those two medicines there, they were mind blown. Well, then Nixon came along, saw all that happening, because it was not illegal. It was just but it was an underground thing. And they saw all the big pharma saw it, didn't like it, had Nixon Schedule 1 it, and the very next year, Valium was the #1 selling drug in the country. Wow. So, yeah, we wouldn't be with these SSRIs. I don't know what you know about those, but the way they change brain chemistry and stuff, we wouldn't be in those situations we're in, because that should be a short-term solution, if any. But, so many use it as a long. But that's actually where all of that started. So, we heard about it through word of mouth. And then there's an application you fill out, and there's a nonprofit called Vets Inc. that will send special operations gunfighters for free. So if you're a Ranger, Green Beret, any of that, they'll send you for free one time. But that's how I initially heard about it, and I mean that was the most life-changing week of my life, like bar none.
I want to hear about it. Like what you decided to go. You fill out this application.
Mm-hmm.
They say, okay, you're approved. How long until you're going to go at that point?
Typically, there's at that facility, there's especially now, there's a very long wait. I think at the time there was typically a 5 or 6 month, 4 month wait, whatever. It was a decent amount of time. On my intake call there, because they're very good at what they do, I told them, I was like, hey, I don't want to be alive. Like, I'm not in a great place. Like, what prompted the actual call was, back in the day when I got med boarded in 2016, I almost took my own life one night. My dog stopped me. Well, fast forward, I had a 510 credit score. I was broke in debt and all this. I self-medicated with work, chartering. So I don't want to say I was good at it, but good things came out of the charter business because that was my only focus.
Right.
So, the big boat came, the 30-foot boat came in 2020. The house got paid off, like this happened, all these crazy good things. And I was falling apart on the inside. I was spending money as fast as I was making it, trying to fill emptiness from the inside with outside things, which everybody does, I think. And then one day I was offshore. I was 80 miles out. Our Gulf Stream's, the ledge is really far from us. I was by myself fishing, and I was just kind of had a moment where I was like, I'm done. I'm tired of this. I don't want to be here. There was no depression, anxiety, anger. It was just, I'm done. So I put out a spread. I put out like a 6-rod spread. I put the boat in gear, put autopilot on, took the pistol out of the bag and was going to jump in the drink and off myself. Right. And, I wanted it to look like an accident so my mom didn't think I committed suicide, right? I thought I was being slick. And I kind of had a moment where God was like, bro, what are you doing? Like, you're living a dream life. Like, I had the hot girlfriend, the 30-foot boat, and 4 years before that, I was sitting in a house with dog feces with a gun in my mouth, right? So it was a huge turnaround. And, God was kind of like, bro, what are you doing? And it clicked, like, something's wrong. Like, this isn't just I'm depressed. This, like, obviously PTSD is a very broad thing, but, like, this is a deep-seated issue. And I didn't know a whole lot about brain damage and stuff at the time. Like, obviously I knew it affected behavior and this, that, and the other. And then when I heard about Ibogaine, that's when I was like, this is my last chance. Like, if this didn't work, I was probably going to take my own life, if we're being honest. So you sign up, you go, and that was one of the big appeals for me with Ibogaine was it actually it's proven by Stanford to remove scar tissue from the brain and grow gray matter.
Wow.
So in theory, it could prevent dementia. They're also using it to treat MS and Parkinson's. Brett Favre just left the same facility I went to. The stuff they're doing with this, like people with MS and Parkinson's that shake so much they can't do anything, they go and do a flood dose of Ibogaine. And I'm not sure what the protocol is after, but they get their life back. They can drive again. It kind of, I don't want to say it puts it in remission because I don't think that's the right word, but it definitely takes it way back. And it actually reverse ages the brain an average of 1.5 years per blood dose. So it's yeah, bro. I mean, you can look. This is all done by Stanford. This isn't just a bunch of hippies.
I've heard so much about Ibogaine, but some of those things that you're telling me are not anything that I've heard before. And why is it not being used more? I mean, because of big pharma. I mean, is that? I think it's big pharma.
And then it's, man, even if you're not a person that's glued to the TV and stuff, I got a buddy in the Intel world. He says everybody believes in propaganda, but nobody believes they ever fell for propaganda, right? Yeah. Like, but that's how propaganda is working. But I'm very open and vocal about my psychedelic experiences. So like when I did some ayahuasca in Peru in June, a guy sent me down for 2 weeks. And I was sharing my experiences, the morning after they happened, very detailed on Facebook. And the vast majority of people are supportive. But your whole life, from Nixon, then you had the government in the 80s that was, it's been proven that they were allowing cocaine into the country. Like, we know that happened. And at the same time, Reagan, who's allowing the cocaine in, him and his wife are starting this DARE program, which was over $1 billion with a B was spent and they can't say it did any good, right? So you have this whole war on drugs. We all remember, this is your brain. This is your brain on drugs. Any questions? You know what I mean? Like, you'll smoke a joint and jump off a building.
Yeah.
So you still have that mentality, and I think that holds people back. I mean, I've seen people slamming beers and taking shots, and I'm talking to them about psychedelic medicine. They're like, that can't be good for you. That
Yeah,
can't
right.
be good for you. Like, that stuff will kill your brain. It's like, no, actually, it promotes healing of the brain. Actually makes you. It's been
Well,
proven to make you
let's
more
talk about what
intelligent.
it actually did for you. So you go to
Okay, yeah, my bad. I went down a rabbit hole
well,
there.
no, that's okay. I mean, I'm very interested in it because, like, I think it's got some really big benefits. So you go down and you do you're set up to do this Ibogaine. Tell me
Yep.
about how is it presented to you? Is it a liquid?
Okay.
What is it like? Describe the whole.
So well, the whole experience is basically, they make it, Ambio makes it very easily. Ambio Life Sciences. So you fly into San Diego, you check into the Sheraton Hotel at the marina there, and then they pick you up there the next morning. And they take you into Tijuana. You're in a beautiful house in a gated community. You take a urinalysis when you get there, because you can't have alcohol or opioids in your system, because it can negatively react with the medicine.
Mhm.
So you do all of that, and then you do what they call a circle up, which is everybody gets in a circle group, and you kind of talk about why you're there and your issues. Share as much or as little as you want. The food's great, chefs, the whole 9 yards. So Tuesday rolls around, day 2. That's the day you take the medicine. So you do a circle group, all this stuff, then you do your afternoon fast, and then they give it to you in a pill. So Iboga is a bush. So what you take is actually the root bark. So that's Iboga. So the bark of the root is what you're taking. But what they do, and what makes it Ibogaine instead of Iboga, is they take the psychoactive alkaloids out of it, and they basically make it more potent. So they give you a couple of doses in little pills. So it's just a powder in a pill. And down the hatch you go. You take 4 separate doses spread out over an hour and a half, I think, if I remember correctly. And then it's off to the races. So, like, once it's ingested, you feel the medicine setting in. You go down, I call it the journey room, or you go down or up, it depends on which house you're in. They set you in front of a mirror. You got this maraca or shaker, we call it, and you're staring in this mirror, pitch black room with a candle in front of the mirror, just a small
You're by
candle.
yourself? Are you by
No,
yourself?
the whole group's in there, but you go so much within, it doesn't matter.
All
Like,
right.
I think the last time I was there, we was like 8 of us. So you're sitting there, and they have Iboga comes from Gamboa, in Africa, from the Bwiti tribe, Bwiti. And so the Bwiti tribe, they're the ones that have used this medicine forever. And they have this crazy, like, tribal music. So they microdose or take small amounts of Ibogaine, and then they actually make the instruments. Then they write the music while on Ibogaine. Then they perform it while on Ibogaine. So you have this recording of this super loud tribal music, and you're staring, and then, like, psychedelic stuff can start happening. You'll start catching visuals, and then whenever you're ready, you put your eye mask on and you lay down. They have like a mattress out, like a foldable mattress laid out, with, like, nice fresh sheets, a blanket if you need it, and you can bring down all the pillows and stuff you want. And then it's off to the races. I took an opioid, a guy that was prescribed opioids, Vicodin or Perks or whatever, for 22 years from the VA. He couldn't get off of them. Took them, and it shuts off your addiction receptors in your brain. So you, like, my first time I went, I was a 2-pack a day smoker. I was prescribed Xanax, all of these things you should be addicted to, or I was addicted to, white sugar, caffeine. And I haven't wanted nicotine since that first night, like, not even close. So it literally shuts off those receptors. So there's no more physical addiction. Your physical addiction's gone.
That works with
But
alcohol too and everything?
everything. Yep.
No.
Yeah, they can actually bring a heroin addict off of heroin if you go there for like 3 weeks, I think it is. I forget how long, but they can actually bring you off heroin and you can never feel a withdrawal symptom.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
So-
But the experience is, the actual psychedelic experience itself is, I'd say the peak is 6 hours. I mean, it's
So
Yeah, and
how would you describe this? Is it pleasurable? Is it a journey? Like what is it? What are you
oh
going?
yeah. I've done this fall, this October, it'll be my fourth time going to that facility. I've taken groups of vets with me this will be the third
For
time.
the Ibogaine.
Yep, for Ibogaine, and they do 5-MeO DMT there as well, the toad. But yeah, I mean, I felt physically, I felt God's love physically for the first time ever on Ibogaine. Um, for a split second, I felt the most fear I've ever felt in my life. But that being said, there's always lessons to be learned with it, right? Like clearly feeling God's love, that's a beautiful thing. Like I wish everybody could feel what I felt that night. Um, but the worst fear, like I realized, I think it was my second time there. Yeah. I realized I'd gone through life with like a boy like fear, right? I think like a lot of abused kids might have that. Like I might not be physically afraid of a gunfight, but I always had this like uncertainty fear, like a little bit of anxiety about stuff, right? And I really didn't realize it until after the first time I went to Ibogaine, because it's like you take all this junk away, and especially if you got a lot of junk piled up, well, now you're like, well, shit, I didn't even know that junk was there. Like we've got to address this, and like you learn you got a tool like Ibogaine, so you're going to use it. But that the medicine was showing me with the fear that it let me feel it, and then like across my eye mask, lightning bolts kind of showed up with letters, and then in my left ear I heard the fear is not real. And ever since that moment, that childlike fear is gone.
Wow.
I mean, yeah. And like what was happening during the vision, and it was really random. It was like this young, I guess, witch or something, it felt like. I don't know. She was in this like long flowy sundress. She felt like a beautiful woman, you know what I mean? And like she was like running around my bed, like doing this giggle. And it scared the daylights out of me. I would take my eye mask off to make it stop. I would purge. And then I'd be like, because like sometimes you purge, like you throw up and stuff. So like I'd purge, and I'm sitting there and like giving myself a pep talk. And at one point I was actually laughing, and I was laughing. I was like, what is wrong with me? I know this isn't real. Like there's nothing to be afraid of. And that's the time when I put my eye mask on. It said the fear isn't real. I laid down. She made another lap out of my bed, and I kind of was like, oh, this is nothing. I was like, I wonder how cute she is. I can't really see her. And she laughed and like ran out of the room. And then it was on to the next part of the journey. So
interesting that something like that would be how fear is like that's the way it's manifested in your brain, is this woman that might be good looking like that. Isn't that strange? Like you would think that the fear would be like the Grim Reaper or like some crazy thing, and you experienced like this like in a sundress, like a
really weird. And I'm really like I've always gravitated toward women. I'm sure it's to do with my daddy issues and stuff, right? But like my mom's my best friend. I've got sisters. Most of my civilian friends that I'm friends with are females. So it almost makes it even more strange that the fear came to me in that. I don't know, like almost like Lucifer and the serpent, maybe. I'm not sure. It was really, really interesting though. So it is like Ibogaine can be the most beautiful thing. It can be terrifying. You might face your trauma, whether it's an abuser or a war situation, head on. I had one journey. I've actually got, you probably can't see it, and see the pink one right there.
Yeah.
So that's the penguin, and that's the Ibogaine molecule. So my last time there was this last fall, actually last late October. I went there because I realized, doing all this work on myself, I'm constantly working on myself and doing these psychedelic medicine. There was like a hate, like buried down deep. I was happy for the first time. I was experiencing internal happiness, all these great things. And I just kind of thought it was part of me. It had been there for so long. And the second time I was at Ibogaine, I was there with my buddy who's a triple amputee. He got blown up in 19, and it actually did wonders for his chronic pain until he started sipping the beer again, and then it came back. But we were there, laying there, and at the it was like at the end of the journey, I saw all these faces, and my father was in there as well. But I saw all these faces of people who had wronged me in my life. And I personally believe like the medicine is a direct connection to God. Like I believe through evolution and whatnot that our brains, because evolution is all about survival, right? And reproduction. That's it. So evolution is strictly to make you survive and reproduce, not to thrive. I mean, it's just not how it's designed. So it's one of those things to where I believe that over the millennia or however long we've been here, that our brains have simplified things so much, and we've kind of, especially with distractions that we all have, we've kind of lost that connection with God, that connection with nature. And if you like read the Bible and stuff, or pretty much any religious teachings, as far as I know, it basically says God's in me, God's in you, God's in all living things, right? And I think we've lost that. And I believe these plant medicines, they activate the brain in certain ways that it kind of brings down that veil and lowers those barriers. And I almost think it's like a direct connection to God. Yeah. So it's like the medicine, and you can interact with the medicine like Ibogaine, like you can like interact with it, ask it things, like it'll interact with you back. It's crazy. But at the end of my second journey, I'm seeing all these faces of the people that wronged me, and the medicine God, whatever, was like, hey, it's time to forgive. And I was like, no, I don't forgive. Like, that's not me, and it's, not, I came back to the room, and it was funny because in our circle ups leading up to it, the owner of the facility who knew me was like, hey man, maybe one of your intentions, maybe it's time for you to start forgiving. And I was like, no, not going to happen. My best friend that was there, and I was there with two other buddies. My best friend is like, dude, he's like, I've seen Jim give people the last money as a bank account, you do this, he'll do that, blah, blah, blah. He's like, don't ask him to forgive, like won't happen. But it was funny because
that seed beforehand, and that's where that came from.
Oh, it could, that definitely could be. Even though that he said that, and I brain dumped it. Right. But that doesn't mean it's not there. Our brain is just a sophisticated computer, is all. He definitely could have planted that seed, which was what was odd is that, or interesting, is that I was very deep in the medicine still. Like I was still in the medicine. I told it I wouldn't forgive. Boom, snap of the fingers, I'm back in that room. And I couldn't go back in. Like I was doing breathing exercises, trying to get it to kick back in.
Totally sober. Like nothing was happening.
Yep. All the vision stopped. Like you were still feeling the physical effects, but like I went from being super deep in a crystal clear vision to being like you and I are right now. And it wouldn't let me back in. And it kind of messed with me. Like as the weeks went by, like I felt better than I did before I went in. But then I was actually weed eating out back one day. And I was like, man, I believe the medicine's a direct connection to God. The medicine asked me told me it's time to forgive. And I said no, angrily. I was like, I basically just gave the finger to the medicine, to God, to my mother who taught me to love God. Like, I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, this is terrible. I was like, I need to get back down there. I need to deal with this. So a couple months went by, and I was like, trying to navigate it myself. And then I set up another appointment down there, and was like, hey man, like we need to tackle this. And then and I'm getting to the penguin, and it was they give you like a counselor. You deal with a counselor before you go down. Mm-hmm. And it was my first time seeing a male counselor ever. I'd met him at my previous Ibogaine trip, and I was like, hey, I want this guy to be my counselor this time. So that was unique for me and new. I was very comfortable with it, but before the medicine, I would have never done that. That would have been way out of my comfort zone. So I was talking to him, and he was like, hey man, like we're going to get to the root of this so we can get rid of this like hate and resentment. And I'm like, okay. He's like, when was the first time you felt shame? And I'm like, man, it's like, that's a weird question, And I laughed, and then like I'm thinking about it, and I'm going back through my childhood, and I'm like, well, here's this here. And there was no emotion about any of this. Some of it was guessing. I was like, maybe I felt shame, maybe.
Right.
And then I got all the way back to when my dad, the first Christmas, he was married to my stepmom, and I had to go with them. And this will probably sound like nothing to some people. And it was interesting to me though. Anyway, I go over to her family's house. Great people, great people. Just, this was back in the day, man. People were different socially, etc. we're in what, 89, 90, somewhere in there. And, I don't know, there's 20 some people in this, big house. Cause like, I didn't really know what a big house was at the time. And they set me against a wall in this little chair. Her sister, if I remember right, like brought me a plate of food and talked to me for a minute. Then I sat there and watched kids just open their presents, interact with their family, and I just sat there. And then my old man got a few beers in him, and even at 6 years old, I was never like man enough for him. Like, I can't repeat on your show things he used to call me and stuff. You can probably imagine, but like, I mean, dude, at 6 years old, like he was telling me I was going to grow up, and which there's nothing wrong with this, but he's telling me I was going to grow up and be a homosexual, but not in those words. He would call me that. He would call me, slang terms for different races. Like, and like I said, this is young. And he came up and he was a few beers deep, and my cousin by marriage was a few years older than me, and everybody's all into like wrestling and football and stuff back home, and he was like, you need to come in here and wrestle him. And dude, I'm 6, this dude's like 9, 10, something like that. And dude just throttled me. Like, I didn't even wrestle at the time, dude. I didn't know what I was doing. And I'm a little dude. Like, as a child, I was real small, and just throttled me for I don't know how long. I mean, and it was funny because like I told the counselor that, and immediately like broke down, bro. Like, you just killed my dog. Like, and I was like weeping, and I was like, oh wow, like I didn't see that coming. So I go there, and there was some violence, which this is kind of uncommon, but there was some violence in my first 2 Ibogaine journeys. Like, I did battle basically with my dad, right? Like, that was extremely violent. That happened twice in my first journey. And then like after the second time it happened, it was very liberating, freeing. And that's when I felt all the negativity leave me, and then God's love fill me. And then my second Ibogaine journey, like the big thing, I was doing battle with my ego. And I actually pushed a version of myself off this cliff and like watched me fall. Wow. And like a version of me die. Yeah. So it can be, for me, it's been some pretty intense stuff with Ibogaine. So like, I'm sitting here going through my last journey, and there wasn't a lot of crystal clear visions, but I could feel stuff working in the brain. Like, you got to trust the process. And then all of a sudden, like, I'm like laying there, and it looks like you're looking out a screen door, right? Like on grandma's back porch, right? One of those things. And it was like people would walk in, and then they would come into my right eye to where I could only see them in my right eye. And it was everybody in my life that I love. Greg from Starbright was there, Turner, my mom, go down the laundry list. And then I saw the figure. It was 2 people, a kid and an adult. Oddly enough, my girlfriend, she's 20 years my senior. Her first husband died of an overdose, like when I was like little, he was a doctor, had an addiction issue, was a great guy, just a great dude. He's a South American dude. But he was with me. No idea why, but he was with like the 6-year-old version of me. And I'm like, what is Sergio doing here? Like, this is weird, but whatever. It was very comforting in an odd way. And I had no connection with him other than Bonnie. And then my vision got crystal clear. And then that 6-year-old version, or however old I was, version of me, I saw me back in that room, just like you and I are talking right now. And like all that hate and anger started coming up, and I thought there was going to be this big battle because, my previous 2 journeys, there was a little violence in there, so I'm getting a little hyped up, man. It's go time, baby. Like, let's fight, And then all of a sudden, and no idea why, my entire life, I've loved penguins. I think they're adorable. I love how if one gets away from the flock, they won't leave him. They'll go back and pick him up. Their loyalty is absurd. They're always dressed to impress in their tuxedos. But even in bouts of depression and stuff I've had, like, I'll turn on, for background noise or whatever, I'll turn on a penguin documentary just because they lift me up a little bit. Never had a reason why. It was never like a huge deal. There was never penguin decorations everywhere, but it's always been with me. And then that little version of me, I'm getting all this hate and anger built up for this fight of my life. And then the kid version of me turns into a cartoon penguin with a camouflage Starbright ball cap on, and then like a triangle pennant in this hand, and like one of those big circle lollipops that I don't even eat lollipops in this hand. And he was just kind of dancing back and forth, talking about how happy he was. Everything's great. Everything happens for a reason. It was just this joyous thing. And it was all of that deep seated hate just sucked right out of me, like in that moment. And I immediately forgave my dad. And it's like, I can't even hold a grudge anymore. I mean, I'm sure, I guess if I put effort to it, I could. But I think of people that have done bad stuff to me or whatever, or do bad stuff still, rip me off in business or try to get one over the nonprofit. Obviously, there's can be emotion there, but it's not like it was for me. Like, it was a very unhealthy thing.
So let me ask you this: you finished that, and I don't know how long it takes you to kind of get off the medicine. Then you sleep, I don't know, and then you wake up the next day, and do you just feel like a different person? Do you feel like there's been this incredible weight lifted off of you, or that there's just something, I don't know. I've thought about it like this would be just like like my wife had a hip replacement, and she had this intense pain, and she gets her hip replacement, and then the next morning she wakes up and she's like, it's gone. It's gone. Like the pain that she was so used to and the pain that was accompanying her at all the time was just gone. Now it was replaced with all kinds of different pain because she just had a hip replacement. But that was just, she was just like, it's gone. I mean, is that what that feels like? Like all of a sudden this has been with you for your life and now it's just gone?
Yes. So when you come out of the medicine, most people have what's called a gray day. It's kind of like a hangover without the shame, as the owner Trevor calls it. I'm one of like the 0.5%. I don't get a gray day. Like for me, I come out of the medicine, I immediately feel like $1,000,000. All 3 times I've taken it, the very next morning, like I don't go to sleep or anything, even though you didn't sleep that night. I go out front. If they let me have my headphones, I put on my headphones and I do push-ups and air squats and crunches. I'll go on a run if they let me. Then later on, really most people feel it after you go to sleep, when you get your first 4+ hours of sleep and then wake up. You know, my first time doing it, Tom, when I came to, if you will, the next morning when I was out of the medicine, I was like, man, what is this feeling inside of me? Like, you know, before I was in the military and stuff, I experimented with a lot of different substances, even the really bad ones. Definitely not proud of it. Life experience though. And it's like, man, this isn't drug induced. This isn't psychedelic induced. Like I'm familiar with that enough. And it turned out, Tom, what it was internal happiness. And I'd never felt it before. So it took me a while to figure it out. Like, right. Like I had been happy from tagging a white shark, a touch from a beautiful woman, petting a dog. Right. But I had never, until April of 23, I had never been happy just for existing.
Wow.
So that was very, that was a huge change. You know, then the day after your gray day, you take 5-MeO-DMT, which is the dried out poison from the bufo toad, right? Or the Colorado River toad, whatever. Super cool stuff. They call it the God molecule or bliss molecule. Complete out of body experience. You're not here anymore. You experience complete ego death. So like you feel like you're dying. You're fine. But like you'll feel like you're dying, but you got to let go of that. You got to let that part of you die, and then you break through to pure bliss. And that's kind of like the cherry on top after Ibogaine. Although there are places that treat with just 5-MeO-DMT and do it successfully. And you know, when I came out of that medicine, just to tell you how effective these medicines are, you know, Trevor, the owner, was the one that provided for me on the 5-MeO the first time. Like, you know, he lit the pipe and all that stuff. And it's crazy because we know Greg from Starbright, right? Greg and I are close. Greg is by far my best civilian friend in the world. You know, he's the one that he got the shark tagging program for us. You know, and that came to be from me going down there one Christmas when I was suicidal, and he was like, "Hey man, like what could I do to help Not Lucky besides, you know, write a big check or something?" I was like, "Dude, a shark tagging program, white shark tagging program would be great." He made that happen. Before I left for my first time to Ibogaine, Greg was the last person I talked to before I got on the plane,
Wow.
or before I got in the car to go to Tijuana. And he said it, he goes, I don't know. He's like, I didn't have an understanding of mental health until we became friends. And then he closed our conversation by saying, no matter, sorry. He's like, no matter what happens, he was like, I just hope this medicine shows you to yourself as we all see you.
Right.
He was like, I want you to see what we all see. And then, the night when I was suicidal, when Christmas and was down at his Keys house with him, he was like, you're building an empire. And I'm like, building an empire? Like, what? Dude, I was like, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. I was like, I'm not Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, bro. I was like, thanks for the pep talk, big brother. I'm getting in the pool. And we dropped that, right? Well, fast forward to this 5-MeO journey. And usually 5-MeO DMT, it's not like crystal clear visions and stuff. It's like shapes that don't exist, colors that don't exist, feelings of bliss. This was crystal clear. It was like a Mayan empire. I'm like floating above it, and like the warrior elite was intermixing with the civilian population, and they were all ruling together. All the weapons were off at the side at the ready, but nobody was at war. And I'm like, what am I looking at here? You have all these feelings, right? A lot of this is intuition. Things come to you. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, this is beautiful. Like, this is blissful, but what is this? And I heard Greg's voice say, you're building an empire. And everything clicked immediately. I was like, oh my gosh, he's not talking about money or whatever. He's talking about building an empire. Greg was talking about building an empire of peaceful warriors. Like, that's what he was talking about. And I took off my eye mask. I'm on this cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The provider, the owner, Trevor's next to me here. Ruby, who I call my journey mother, she was on my left. I can't wait to go back and see them in October. And I took off my eye mask, and I had tears streaming down my face. And I looked at Trevor. I was like, why did I ever want to die? That is how crazy this medicine is. I got on that plane on a Sunday, as a last resort, ready to take my own life. By Thursday, I have tears streaming down my face looking at a guy I just met on Monday saying, why did I ever want to die? Like, that's how crazy this is. And then I looked out. I saw the heavens kind of merge with the ocean, merge with the beach. Everything merged together at like a molecular level. Everything looked like tarpon scales, like an overlay of tarpon scales. And then I like reached off my blanket to the earth, to the grass, and you could feel the earth's vibration. And I was like, we got a lot of work to do. I need to quit my job. Trevor thought I was like getting a little worked up, and he was like, it's okay, just relax. I was like, no, I am relaxed. And then, I left, came back here. Greg, of course, calls me, and he was like, how'd it go? Like, are you good? And I was like, I don't want to fish anymore. There was pure silence, which I meant I didn't want to run charters. There was pure silence. And he's like, what did they do to you in Mexico? Like, because fishing, saved my life. I'm in people's phones as Fishing Jimmy, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no, brother. I was like, I don't care about, has presented a lot of challenges, but I was like, I don't care about money anymore. I don't want to chase a dollar. I don't care about anything. Like, God put me on this earth to help others. My mom told me when I was an abused child, I asked my mom at probably 8 years old after church once, and I was like, hey, Mom, and I wasn't mad, but I was like, why does God let this stuff happen? And my mom, since I was about 8 years old, said, God is putting you through all this pain because one day you're going to use it to help people. And she's told me that my whole life. So I told Greg, I'm like, no, I still want to fish. I was like, but I just want to fish with vets. I don't want to take paid charters. I don't want to take civilians out. Like, I want to help the hardest that it is to help, the ones that are forgotten, the ones that are quiet, because it's a gap. We're really bad at it in this country and probably the world, but especially this country, we're really bad at it. Helping people with mental health in general. And one issue is you have a lot of educated people creating policy and not a lot of people with experience, not minimizing trauma that a civilian therapist has gone through at all. I'm not going to minimize anybody's trauma, but it's a different kind of trauma when you have childhood trauma, which, like I said, most gunfighters have. You have childhood trauma, then you have war trauma, then you have brain damage. Well, with war trauma typically comes relationship trauma, right? So you're dealing with a lot of different things, and a lot of these educated folks, which education has a place. I've got very educated people that I talk to before I make decisions. But that being said, there's not enough experience. So all of these mental health care programs or treatments, if you will, they're all, one, a lot of them are really outdated, and two, they're very cookie cutter, right? They're like, well, this is going to work, and this, like, everybody does the same thing. And more what we do is, if somebody decides they want help, you don't need to have issues to come fish with us. Just active duty, you're a vet, you come fish. If you decide you need a little extra help, basically what I do is I interact with that person, I talk with them, and then try to get them on the right path based off of what I see with them and what I've experienced and seen others go through. And I think that's one thing that was really lacking. And another thing in the nonprofit world, especially the veteran nonprofit world, sadly, there's a lot of like ego, and I don't think it starts off as that. But it turns into like ego, money, and then to, draw and I love our first responders and definitely want to grow into helping them one day. But a lot of people, a lot of organizations, before they're making a real impact with veterans, they reach out and do the first responders as well. Well, and I think that's because it's the veteran community is only a certain size. And man, we're a hard group to help, man. We really are. We're like, I know when I was in my dark, what's that?
A hard group to help specifically.
Dumb pride is one thing. I don't like using the word dumb when talking about mental health, but we all have some dumb pride, or had some points in our life where we've had some dumb pride. There was such a stigma about it in the military for a long time. We were taught to lie about any mental health issues or brain damage or concussions because it can get you removed from your job. So when it's a very, and for men in general, I think this is the case, but especially in the gunfighter world, you never admit anything wrong. Everything's okay. And I mean, I can't tell you how many times, whether you sprain an ankle and it's all swollen, or you've got the flu or whatever it is, suck it up and drive on. You're tough. You're a ranger. Suck it up, drive on, drink some water, take an aspirin, whatever it is, but you keep going. So I think that's one reason we're really hard to help. And I mean, honestly, we were talking about the stolen valor and stuff earlier. That raises levels of frustration to guys that need help. Then in the back of your head, there's a thing called imposter syndrome, right? Like a lot of successful people have it, to where it's like, man, I'm not really doing this stuff. I've wrestled with it before, right? But I think it's a very common thing in the veteran community. You see these stories running around, and not to beat a dead horse, but somebody like, I'm using Kennedy as an example because he's such a big figure, right? He's not a dude at a bar telling bullshit war stories. Like, he's a very well-known man making a lot of money off of this. And I mean, that can kind of create imposter syndrome in people that are in a bad place, right? And creates frustration. And when you're in a bad place with mental health issues, or the depression and anger, and usually there's some kind of addiction in there, right? Whether you're prescribed SSRIs, or Xanax, benzos from the government, or you're self-medicating with alcohol, sugar, sex, you name it. You start adding all of those things in there, and it's just it's a really tough shell to crack.
Yeah.
I will say, once you crack that shell and these guys and gals in the veteran community decide that they need help, I would say over 80%, but we'll call it 80%, that I work with, when they say they are ready for a change, they really are.
So with those people, and you're helping them in a lot of different ways. You're taking them fishing. You're just talking to them. You're communicating with them. You're being a friend. But how do you know when it's the right person at the right time to direct them to the Ibogaine?
they say the medicine, and which I agree to this, they say like the medicine will call to you. Especially for veterans, I don't think there's ever a time to not take it. I mean, I think everybody, at minimum, and like civilians as well, should go experience things like ayahuasca at a minimum.
Is there something? Is there? I mean, I think that it's like it's got all this, kind of, I don't know, like aura around it. Like it could be bad. Like there could be something. Is there something to be scared of? Like when
it can have it. Ibogaine itself can affect your heart, but if you're healthy, it doesn't affect you. And also, they send you. You have to go get an EKG and get it examined by their doctor before they even let you show up. And then while you're on the medicine, they keep you hooked up to an EKG. I have never seen it affect anybody that way, and I've been with people of all weight classes and fitness levels. And I've never even heard of it affecting anybody from a firsthand story like that.
But what about on the brain? Like, is there something to be afraid of for people to like, I don't know, like there's you hear about like LSD trips where somebody went on an LSD trip in the 60s and never came back, right? Like, I think that's what people like, especially of an older generation, because of the propaganda or just the culture, is like, I don't know, man. I don't know about that.
Yeah, it's I've heard those. I remember when I was young and wild, and the first time I ever heard the story of somebody going on a permanent trip, I'm like, well, where do I get that acid? I'll never have to take another hit again. This is great. To answer your question, no, I'm not going to say it's not possible for it to cause some kind of psychological breakdown. But that being said, you're going to know you have those kind of issues before you go there, right? Like if you're a paranoid schizophrenic, like you probably shouldn't be messing with this stuff. Like I don't even have to let you go if you're a paranoid schizophrenic. Right. But as far as like, we'll use like you as an example, right? Like, let's say you, me, and Greg were like, hey, we're going to go do Ibogaine together or ayahuasca, right? You guys would have absolutely nothing at all to worry about. You're not going to have a permanent trip. Like you hit the nail on the head. Like that's propaganda. It's an intimidation thing to make you, not want to see it.
I think it's an interesting question because I think that is really what maybe keeping this from maybe there's things way beyond that are keeping this from therapy that could be used for a lot more veterans. I mean, maybe it probably boils down to money and big pharma and other things that don't want this to happen for whatever reason. I don't know why, but that's all speculation. But I think that kind of idea that the unknown is scary to people. Right. That's what
was just going through my head. I was going to say to you in reply, Tom, is I think a lot of it's change. It's unknown and it's different. And there's something about, like, I don't know if you've ever personally, like yourself, have ever gone into like deep depths of like bad depression. But man, there's just something when you're in that darkness, like you don't believe there's a light. Like you don't believe it's out there. You don't think anything can help. And there's something about it. It's almost, for me, and I think it's also for a lot of people, in my experience working with people, it's almost like an addiction, right? So like if you're addicted to alcohol, like that addiction controls what you do, whether you realize it or not. You know what I'm saying? Like your brain, how addiction works is when that addiction receptors kick, your brain is going to do whatever it has to do to get that substance at once, whether it's cocaine, opioids, booze, sugar, whatever. So I think what it is I think depression or, PTSD, if you will, but I think all of those negative mental health issues can almost have, an addictive nature to it, to where that depression itself almost develops a voice like a substance will. Okay. You'll have people, I've dealt with people that are addicted to different substances they'll be talking about a physical problem they have, right? Like, I had a guy not long ago. He was like, "Oh, you took me on the boat, and it was like a smooth day and everything." And he was like, "I sat up front, and like it was a little bit bouncy, and it was his second time on a boat. Like he doesn't have a gauge yet." And I'm like, "Okay." And he was like, he's like, "Dude, I've got to go to the doctor," which he did. He had to go to the doctor and get things taken care of or whatever they do. He's like, "I got a giant hemorrhoid." And I was like, "Brother," I was like, "I don't think that has to do with the boat." And he's like, "Well, I mean, it might be I had a couple beers last night." And I was like, "Well," and he had told me that because the VA out of nowhere adjusted his pain medicine dosage. So he was on some ridiculous amount for, I think it was 12 years. And then they cut it in half, actually below half. They went from like 80 milligrams a day to 30, like without telling him, no warning, didn't wean him off. So what he'll do is obviously he'll front load and go on like almost like a little bender and then run out of pills, right? Well, what happens when you come off of pain meds? You're constipated, right? Like you're extremely constipated, right? Especially you've been hitting them hard. So when you have that first bowel movement, it can mess you up a little bit. And I looked at him and I was like, you think maybe it was the pills and coming off that and getting your bowels moving again? And he was like, "Oh." So I say that because he wasn't cognitive about doing that. He wasn't making a direct decision to say, "Hey, I'm going to steer this way." That was that addiction saying, "Hey, nope, it was the boat." Like, come on, man. And he wasn't upset. I wasn't upset. The boat beat him up or something. Boat beat you up, man. It happens out there. But it's just funny. And I think depression and stuff, I think it works the same way, Tom. I think it'll steer you away because it wants to stay there. It wants to grow. It's an evil entity, if you will, and the devil or, whatever you believe in. But there's definitely dark forces at work in the world, or the world would be a lot cooler place.
So the place that I do have experience with that is the sugar, where you're eating a lot of sugar. It's not good for you. It doesn't feel good. You're not getting in the condition that you want to, or you're progressively getting in worse condition. But there's something going on in your brain and in your gut that is saying you have to eat more. You have to eat more. Like you cannot stop doing it. Like there is a full-on addiction there that
it really is.
That you have to continue eating it. And you walk by something and it smells so good, and you just I got to have that, even though
and that's the chemical. I'm sure you well know. It's like the dopamine, right? So like you get a dopamine release with that, right? And that's something else like with depression. So I watch, I haven't watched in a long time. I used to watch the Huberman podcast a lot. He's a neuroscientist. He's awesome. He's a Stanford guy. He talks about Ibogaine and stuff. So in my job line, I see a lot of guys in toxic relationships that won't get out of them, right? And this is a human thing. This isn't just veteran community. I just deal with the veterans a lot more. And, I've been there. When I was in a really bad mental health place at one point in my life, I was in a really toxic relationship with a person that, of course, now you look at and you're like, what was I doing? So I was watching this thing, Huberman, about toxic relationships and the carousel, the merry-go-rounds, the cycles we get ourselves into. And some people actually, and I believe this can happen with depression and stuff too, some people actually get addicted to it because your brain, and forgive me, I don't remember all the chemicals, but during that cycle, there's going to be some point where there's a little bit of an upside. Mm-hmm. So basically, from where I'm sitting and my perception of it is you can get addicted to the depression because there is going to be a little uptick somewhere.
Yeah.
So I think that's another reason it's hard. But I encourage all veterans, especially, I get people, since I did the 2-week ayahuasca retreat, people ask me a lot, like, well, which is better? Which is this? They call Ibogaine the father plant medicine, and they call ayahuasca the mother plant medicine. Yeah. And we all know that if a household works better with both parents. Right. But if you have any kind of brain damage, or ayahuasca works for substance abuse too, but like physical addiction, Ibogaine's where you need to start. If you're dealing with, trauma and there's, not brain damage, or you haven't been on SSRIs a long time, ayahuasca might be a way for you. I think there's a place for both of them though.
Interesting. So there's one question here that when I said that I was going to do this podcast with you, a question came up, and there was a guy that we knew that went to do ayahuasca, and he did not necessarily set an intention and ask the mother ayahuasca to help him with this particular thing, and nothing happened. He did not, just like you're talking about where you got locked out when you said you weren't going to forgive. Basically, he never set an intention. He took the medicine, nothing happened. He tried to get in, he tried to do all this stuff. Then he went back and they said, well, you didn't set your intention. And so then he did set the intention and it was like it was planned, right? And so what was interesting is my son asked that question. He goes, well, if you're having to ask for the intention, and you're supposed to ask, or you're having to set an intention and then ask a question, are you really asking the medicine that question? Are you asking the universe that question? Are you asking God that question? Who do you think you're communicating with?
So for me, it's actually a really awesome question. And I love this one too. So for me, I personally believe, and I will address, when I'm on ayahuasca or taking ayahuasca, like I will talk to Mother Ayahuasca or talk to Ibogaine, but really for me, it's that connection to God. Ibogaine and the medicines in general, to me are like a telephone. Right? Not that you can't converse with God without being under the influence of psychedelics. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it's a lot more effective, right? Like, I feel like when I'm not in that realm, you're talking to God on a push to talk, right? And when you are in that realm, it is crystal clear 4K HD Zoom call, baby. Or he's sitting right in front of you sometimes. So I think you're talking to that. You mentioned the universe. So especially the ayahuasca world, there's kind of like two psychedelic camps. There's a Ibogaine and a ayahuasca. That there's not an overwhelming amount of people that I've personally met that have done both. I've actually only met 2 people that have done both besides me. But the universe is what they all talk about. And the universe and God are the same thing. Like they did this thing at the ayahuasca retreat where it was like a song and a thing, but it was like talking about or it was to the sun goddess or something, or somebody, I forget what it was. And it kind of bothered me, not made me mad, but I'm like, dude, and I took the head provider aside. I was like, hey bro, and I actually posted about this too. Actually posted about it first that I felt like I got ambushed into going and doing a song to some goddess that's not my personal thing. Right. And after I made the post, I talked to the lead provider, Billy, great guy, man. And I was like, hey, man, why don't you give us a heads up about that? I'm not mad, but I think that, there's a couple other Christians in there that were kind of like, what are we doing? And he said, the sun goddess, whatever her name was, it basically said along the lines of it's all the universe. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he was like, well, when we talk about thanking the universe and the universe gave this to us and this, that, and the other, he was like, you just call it God. He's like, we just call it something different. In a podcast, I don't remember what it was, something I had on last night while I was working on the computer. This one guy, this physicist said, and his whole thing about the podcast, I got to watch it again or listen to it again. The whole thing was everything. Our whole existence is based upon love, and we've just lost that. That's a big thing in the ayahuasca world is the love. And it's like there's only one truth, right? And that's love. Like God made us all out of love. Everything God created was out of love. So there's only one truth, and that's love. And that's the love of our God. God's inside of us. We have to love ourselves as we love God, right? So there's one truth, but there's 1,000 different ways to get there. One of my goals now, long-term goals, God kind of talked to me when I was at Walter Reed for 3 weeks with my triple amputee buddy when he was getting some follow-up surgeries. You don't want to leave somebody in a hospital by themselves. It's bad for the brain. So I was up there sitting with him, and I came in one day after taking a shower in the room and came back, and I was like, we need to build a church. So I'm a very strong Christian. But that at the same time, like, especially if you have never been taught about Jesus and stuff, I believe that you can go to one of these other religions and kind of get to the same truth, right? Like, obviously, I believe in one God. I believe in Jesus Christ, the Holy Spirit, the whole nine. Uh, but just because I do believe that is the only right, if you will, but if you've never been taught that and you weren't raised that, or that's not in your culture, I believe you can still lead a great life and live for him, even though you don't call it for him, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um,
No, it
so
does. I've always wondered. Like, I don't know. That's always been kind of a mystery. That part about religion, like if someone is never, I don't know. I guess that's why you're supposed to go and spread the gospel, because it's your duty to contact people that have never been contacted and to teach them. But there are a lot of people out there that don't ever encounter that.
they don't know, and they don't encounter that. They don't know about it. They haven't been taught. Or, one thing I run into a lot is, it sucks to say as a Christian man, but the church can leave a bad taste in some people's mouths sometimes. A lot of people, especially veterans, can find it to be a judgmental place. I don't attend church. I read scripture. I talk about God all the time. I talk to God all the time. But that's one reason long term, I feel like we're supposed to create a church. Like, I want a church, with no judgment. I want to talk about, as things get rolling with it one of these days, and this is a long ways off, talk about the uncomfortable things, and I don't think there's anything wrong with having somebody that's a Buddhist come in and speaking in your Christian church. It doesn't mean that we're going to follow Buddha, right? But I don't think there's anything wrong with learning about somebody else's faith. It doesn't mean you have to convert, or you have to convert them, but how about just talk, right? Like, there's such division in the world, and the only way that we can unite is for conversations to happen and to learn about each other from each other, right? Not just what Facebook tells us about what this demographic's doing and what this demographic's doing. And if you do this and dress like this, you're like this. It might be the case sometimes, but more often than not, it's not the case. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
People see me walking around talking about, psychedelics, long hair, and sometimes sometimes the way I dress, and like I'll be like, oh yeah, I was an Army Ranger, and they're like, no way. It's like, yeah, man. Like, yeah, you can't really judge a book by its cover. And so I think that's the direction I want things to go. Like, I think we can break down barriers that way. And I think it's important to show people, and I believe it's how God wants us to live, And I think one thing that's forgotten by people in Christianity in the church sometimes, or in Christianity in general, is I think they kind of forgot that Jesus was a dude that ran around just spreading love, doing good, having a few miracles here and there. But his disciples, his closest people, were murderers. They were tax collectors. I call it his girlfriend. I know it can be a touchy subject with some scholars and stuff. But I call Mary Magdalene his girlfriend. His girlfriend was a prostitute, for God's sakes. I've read something one time. I went down a rabbit hole, was like, how did the disciples fund all this? Like, what did they do for money? Like, you had to have money. And one of this big rabbit hole I went down was maybe Mary Magdalene and her ladies, like maybe her ladies kind of funded some of it. I don't know if that's the case. I have no idea. I'm not saying one way or another, but my whole thing is that he hung out. He was a long-haired carpenter that hung out with the bottom of the barrel in society. And I think we forget that sometimes. And I think there's something to be said for that, right? Like, Jesus was just a dirty fisherman that hung out with a bunch of other dirty fishermen that, not Jesus, but all of his homies did a bunch of ratty shit in their life, right? And now all of a sudden they're going around spreading the good word. And I think that's something that we've forgotten. I've talked to vets before, where either they're angry at God, and usually when they say they don't believe, it's an anger thing with him, And then you like start talking to them and you explain to them like how they have spread God's love and stuff without even realizing it. And you can actually see them start coming around. I don't ever push it on people. I've got friends that are atheists, and we give each other a hard time. But for the most part, what I've noticed, if you just lead a good life, you don't have that judgment. Like your example is the best to bring those around you to Christ, in my opinion. I know there's some agnostics and some former atheists that I've made scratch their head. And that's another thing funny about that 5-MeO-DMT. I mentioned it's called the God molecule. I've seen that turn 3 devout atheists into Christians in 10 minutes.
Wow.
They come back from it and they're like, there is a God.
You know who Ben Askren is?
No, the name sounds really familiar.
He was one of the best wrestlers ever. He was at Missouri. And
Okay, yeah, that's why it sounds familiar then.
He fought in the UFC, and most people know Ben Askren because he fought Jorge Masvidal and got knocked out in 1 second. Like he threw this flying knee at him as he's going to take him down and knocked him out.
I've seen that clip.
Right. So anyway, Ben Askren got this infection in his lungs. And I don't know if it came from the wrestling mats or what, but he got staph. And he had to have a double lung transplant. And he did. He had a double lung transplant. So there was this guy, he was a big, strong guy, and then he lost so much weight, and he said he died a couple times. His Instagram is very interesting. But one of the times that he died, he said he woke up and he was a Christian.
Really?
Yep. He said it was just weird. He said, I just died and I woke up and I was a Christian. He said, I've been going to church with my wife for 15 years. And he was like, I wasn't really into it, but I was supporting her. And then he had this experience and he just said he woke up and it was clear as day. He was Christian.
That doesn't surprise me. So the near death experience type things, right? So with DMT, with 5-MeO-DMT and so ayahuasca is NN-DMT, and then the toad is 5-MeO-DMT, 2 different molecules, do 2 different things. There's actually endogenous DMT in your body. So you've heard of they think it's like either in with the third eye or the pineal gland that they think it might be produced in. I know it's stored in the lungs as well. And they think it's released just at death or near-death experiences and at birth. Now, I had a near-death experience before I ever touched any kind of DMT. When I was going through alcohol withdrawals, I almost died. I had a near-death experience, and it felt like after I did DMT the first time, 5-MeO, I was like, oh, I was like, that is a near-death experience. I was like, got it. So really with him, that doesn't surprise me at all, because they say when you're dying, your body is like a comfort thing, releases DMT, right? If you've ever gotten the shoot, I forget what the word for it is. I call it the Your Loved One's Dying book from hospice. It talks about like the steps of going to death and like what the body goes through. And like one of the last steps is, you've probably heard of it, when people are talking to relatives that aren't there and they're like looking in corners and stuff of rooms and having a full on conversation with somebody that's not there. Like I saw that kind of stuff with my grandmother as she was passing, and definitely like knowing what I know, it's like, oh yeah, it looks like they're getting a dose of something, you know. Right. So, and I think that's the endogenous DMT.
That's super interesting. There was a book that was a bestseller. It was called The In Between, and it was written by a young hospice nurse. You should check it out. It's wild.
I've heard of it. Hold on, I'm gonna write it down because I've heard of that. And
that is like the most common thing. There's all these very commonalities where somebody will be bedridden for a long time, and then one day she'll show up and they're dressed up in their fanciest church clothes and they're making breakfast, and she's like, "What is going?" I mean, they have been bedridden, and they're up and at 'em, and she's like, "That happens." But the thing about having a full-on conversation with someone with an empty chair and introducing them together, like, oh, this is my nurse Hadley, she's so nice, and this is my husband, you know, and I don't know, she says that happens very, very, very frequently. So very interesting. Man, we could go on forever, and I want to do this again. We're going to run out of time. So can you tell everybody about your organization, how people could support, or if they're a veteran and they want to go fishing, how they could hook up with you?
Yeah, so we're all over Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. My personal is Jimmy Lee Armel, ARM as in Mike, EL. You can hop on there. All the other pages are Not Lucky Veteran Fishing. So if you type that in the search bar, it'll come right up. Our website is notlucky.org. My email is jimmy@notlucky.org. And then they can always, for the time being, we're starting to have a little bit of issue with call and text volume, but my number is area code 540-535-8426. And just shoot me a text, call, whatever, however you can get in touch with me. And we'll get you on the boat. It's very unofficial. If I don't know you, show me a retired ID or your DD-214 and get your fishing license. And, because this is in no way a charter. This money is raised separately. So it's like legally not a charter. So they do need to bring a license along.
Okay.
But besides that, that's it. If they're in a situation where they can't afford a fishing license, we cover it. No big deal at all. And please, you don't have to have an issue. Like I said, if you just want to go fishing, bring the wife, bring the kids, and let's get out there and get after it.
It sounds awesome, man. I'm really excited to have heard this story. I want to thank you for sharing it. There were some deep things there that some people aren't comfortable with sharing. I'm really happy that you told your story here. And it's really cool because when I saw you recently at ICAST, I could clearly see a difference from the time that I had seen you before. And I was like, what is going on? I mean, you just have a whole different, you have a whole different aura around you. You really do. You're smiling more. Your skin looks amazing. I mean, you really do. You just look different. You look different.
Thank
I
you.
wanted to see what it was all about, man. And you're obviously very happy. So I love seeing it. I love what you're doing. And I'm in your corner, my friend.
Well, I appreciate it. And I'm trying to figure out a way to pay for it now for people that aren't special ops, because Ibogaine is pricey to go to. We get a nonprofit discount, so I can get people there through that. But I'm trying to get Ibogaine more readily available, and then we're also going to start doing yearly trips to the Amazon to do ayahuasca, which if you have to come out of pocket for, dude, I'm working as hard as I can to make as much money as I can so people don't have to pay, but it's about a third of the cost. I think the ayahuasca without your travel is $2,500 for the week, which is a lot of money, but it's not a lot of money for what you get.
Right.
So, we haven't announced the date yet, but probably the first week of July, second week of July of next year, we're going to be headed back down. So if you, Tom, or anybody man, that wants to roll with us, just hit me up. We'll get your name on the list and get some healing done, man. So definitely out there trying to spread some love.
Well, it's going a long way, and you're doing a great job. All right. That's Captain Jimmy Armel, and this is the Tom Rowland Podcast. If you like this, share it with your friends, and we'll be back with another awesome podcast just like this next week. All right, see ya.